The Salamanders, originally known as the Dragon Warriors, were the 18th Legion of the 20 Space Marine Legions created by the Emperor of Mankind. The Legion remained loyal during the Horus Heresy, but were severely mauled in the first battle, limiting the role they could play in the remainder of the war. Their Primarch Vulkan was never recorded as perishing, and they believe him simply to be missing. Their search for him and his presumed great purpose is a defining trait of the chapter. Other aspects of the Legion of Vulkan are their great hardiness as warriors and their equally strong constitutions, willpower, and devotion to humanity. In some ways, they can be considered the ideal of what it means to be a Space Marine. Salamander's gene seed is highly unique and mysterious in origin. Along with the Space Wolves and Alpha Legion, the Salamanders had unique gene seed created for a specific purpose by the Emperor. As far as can be determined by the Magos biologists of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Salamander's gene seed appears to be both stable and as yet uncorrupted. An unusual trait of the Salamanders is that their battle brothers tend to be slower in reflex reaction than other chapters, though the origin of this factor is debated. It is unknown whether this defect is due to a problem with the gene seed that manifested as a result of most salamanders being raised on their high-gravity world, or the psychological result of the chapter's doctrines and psycho-conditioning against hastiness and impetuosity. However, it has been noted that a Salamander Space Marine can move just as quickly as any Astartes equipped with power armor, and is still significantly faster than a normal human. The Salamander's most infamous physical trait is a result of a reaction between their genetics and the high levels of radiation on Nocturne. Salamander's battle brothers have dark or jet black skin and bright, burning eyes. This frightening appearance is entirely superficial, but has intimidated more than one rebellion into submission without firing a shot. Another unique genetic trait given by the Salamander's gene seed is known as fire sight, which allows them to see certain levels of infrared light. Millennia ago, Salamander's artificers perfected the manufacture of a material that could generate minute pulses of heat at the specific signatures detectable by their modified eyes, which they layer into the dermis of their ceramite armor and weave into the electro-tapestral strands of the fabric of robes and standards. This substance is applied to armor, gear, and even vehicles, and generates enough heat to be seen by salamanders while remaining unseen by those not attuned to its presence. This allows for sub-levels of strategic communication and hidden tactical markings tracing the air with fire. For more precise and broad visual perception, the salamanders continue to rely on their power armor systems. Besides fire sight, the salamander's gene seed also allows for greater tolerance of extreme temperature and radiation and a higher level of cellular repair. Originally known as the 18th Legion, the origins of what would become the Salamanders are largely shrouded in mystery. In order to protect the nascent Legiones Astartes from both hostile action and espionage, the origins and deployments of several early Legion gene seeds were further classified beyond usual protocol. These Legion groups were formed and established largely in separation from the rest and comprised what would become the Salamanders Legion, along with the Space Wolves and Alpha Legion. Only a few knew that this trefoil of three proto-legions was somehow veiled from the rest during their creation and establishment, and deliberate effort was made to distance these three legions from the others. The exact purpose of this policy was known only to the Emperor and a handful of his aides, and has since been lost to time. The Legion's first recorded significant action was during the assault on the Tempest Galleries against the Ethnarchy during the Unification Wars on Terra. Achieving victory against impossible odds, their active strength was reduced from 26,000 to around 1,000. Nonetheless, they achieved a place of glory in the Imperial military establishment, which helped them rapidly rebuild with new waves of recruits and war gear. Despite this, their losses still lingered, and as a result, The Legion was often deployed piecemeal, with many legionaries of the 18th spread throughout numerous war zones. In particular, they were used to deal with sudden threats that may appear to the rear, such as space hulks or Xenos pirates. Seldom did the 18th fight on a battlefield of its choosing, but they nonetheless received extensive battle honors. Meanwhile, it is believed that the Legion's Primarch Vulkan was discovered around this time, but did not immediately reunite with his forces, instead privately serving alongside the Emperor for several years. It was only during the Great Crusade itself, when Vulkan came to his Legion, during their hour of need. The 18th, led by their Lord Commander Cassian Vaughn, had become embroiled in the defense of a cluster of worlds near the Taurus division against a horde of orcs. They were the only Space Marine Legion able to respond to the crisis, and about 19,000 of their Astartes were forced to hold out against millions of orc raiders and their fleet of rocks. The actions of the Legion allowed the evacuations of 3 entire planetary populations to the nominal safety of the Taurus system, but came at a terrible cost of manpower. Finally, Vulkan learned of their plight and decided that he could not stand by any longer. When Vulkan arrived, he did not do so alone. He brought with him 3,000 new initiates and equipment from Nocturne, his homeworld. Despite their few numbers, the reinforcements brutally fell upon the orcs, spurring the surviving Space Marines to counterattack. Caught between this hammer and anvil of savagery that overmatched their own, the orc horde was broken and began to retreat. The survivors were then relentlessly pursued and consumed by the fire of the Legion's incendiary weapons. In the aftermath, the two halves of the Legion met and were unified as Vulkan finally revealed himself to his sons. The survivors of the 18th Legion knelt immediately, but Vulkan bid them rise, saying that all his sons were equals and he was no petty king needing shows of obedience. Instead, it was he who knelt in honor of the lives they had saved and the price they had paid. Then, seeking out the mortally wounded Lord Commander Vaughn, he conferred the formal transfer of the Legion's mastery by presenting the fallen warrior with the broken power claw of the slain Orc warlord. The Legion was then reorganized by Vulkan and given the name the Salamanders. His restructuring divided the Legion by 7 companies to a chapter, with each company being founded by the 7 different great settlements of Nocturne and commanded by a captain from that settlement. The number of chapters in the Great Crusade-era Legion is currently unknown, but they had at least 34 companies. The Salamanders are generally believed by Imperial historians to have been the smallest legion, though some sources suggest them as being slightly larger than the Thousand Sons. The Salamanders' role during the Horus Heresy is not well known to Imperial scholars. What is for certain is that the Legion, along with the Iron Hands and Raven Guard, was part of the first wave of attackers during the Battle of Istvan V. After the announcement of Horus's treachery and the destruction of Istvan III, the Emperor ordered 7 legions of Space Marines to attack the forces serving his former son and friend. But among those 7 legions, 4 were already traitors. The initial landing force fell into a trap, and despite their martial skills, the 3 loyal legions were forced to begin a tactical withdrawal towards their landing site, which had been fortified by the 4 traitor legions forming the second wave. At this moment, the second wave opened fire on the retreating Marines, crushing them between the hammer of Horus's forces and the anvil of the fortified drop site. Despite a heroic defense, the 3 loyal legions were all but annihilated, and only a handful of battle brothers fell on that fateful day. Salamander's first captain Artellus Numion managed to leave a scattered group of survivors off the planet, but Vulkan's position was struck by a volley of nuclear missiles fired by the Iron Warriors and was declared missing. After this devastating defeat, the Salamanders, as well as the other 2 betrayed legions, were largely unable to perform any tasks the Emperor had planned for them, and spent much of the rest of the time of the heresy rebuilding their forces. Vulkan survived the attack due to his perpetual regeneration abilities, which allowed him to reform after his death, and was briefly made a captive of Night Lord's Primarch Conrad Kurz. Despite multiple executions, the Night Haunter could not figure out a way to permanently kill the Primarch, and eventually Vulkan was able to escape along with scattered survivors of his legion, later helping the reorganization underway in Imperium Secundus with Robauta Guilliman. There, the Loyalists realized that the constant deaths had shattered the body and mind of Vulkan, and were only able to restore his sanity after he was stabbed by John Grammaticus wielding the Fulgurite, which killed him in the process. The Salamanders on Macragge thought Vulkan dead and placed him in the stasis capsule Unbound Flame to lay in state, in preparation for funerary rites to be undertaken by his legion, giving his body an honor guard. Some members of this guard claim to have heard a heartbeat emanating from their father's corpse. Later, the Salamanders, led by Artellus Numion, brought Vulkan back to Nocturne, but were pursued by the Death Guard. After a brief but fierce battle, the Salamanders were able to resurrect Vulkan after Numion provided himself as the final sacrifice. Following his resurrection, Vulkan was discovered by 3 Salamanders and forbade anyone else of knowing of his rebirth. Vulkan led the 3, dubbed his Draxward, into the depths of Nocturne, where they entered the Webway. During a perilous journey, guided by the Talisman of 7 Hammers, Vulkan and the trio eventually arrived at the Imperial Palace. There, Vulkan met with the Emperor and learned of his purpose to oversee the activation of the Talisman and the destruction of terror it would bring, should Horus emerge victorious in the coming struggle. Meanwhile, Salamanders and other Loyalist survivors of the Dropsite massacre began a campaign of vengeance against those who betrayed them aboard the stolen Iron Hands cruiser Sisypheum, striking at Fulgrim and Perturabo on the Crone world of Idris, as well as Alpha Legion outposts. Other Salamanders survivors began a similar guerrilla war against the traitors, perhaps most notably those under Shadrach Medusan. One force of Salamanders, supported by other Shattered Legion members, ventured to Istvan V on the Ebon Drake, where they recovered Cassian Vaughn. The former Lord Commander assumed command of the mixed band and reorganized them as Disciples of the Flames. The Disciples went on to fight in the Mazoan campaign, saving Mazoa from traitors and absorbing a large contingent of Iron Warriors. Having morphed into an almost religious cult, the Disciples of the Flames defended Mazoa and fought Horus's armies for the rest of the heresy, but their ultimate fate remains unclear. After the Siege of Terra concluded and the Emperor was entombed, Guilliman drafted the Codex Astartes to prevent an event like the heresy from happening again. Whilst the Salamanders altered their squad-level organization to follow the strictures of the new Codex, they were able to retain much else of their Legion organization, likely as there were too few of them to split into many successor chapters. Until the coming of Primaris Space Marines and the Ultima founding of M42, the Salamanders were officially reckoned to have no descendants, though several Imperial scholars have pointed out various similarities in unit markings and tactical dogma in the Storm Giants and Black Dragons chapters, making it likely that the Legion did father some successors in now unknown foundings. It is possible that these chapters were created at some unknown, later date from stockpiled gene seed. In the absence of Vulkan, the captain of the First Company was considered the chapter master. This position is seen as a regency, however, and is occupied in the belief that it will one day be relinquished to the true holder of the position. In the 10,000 years since Vulkan's disappearance, the Salamanders have perpetually sought out his artifacts, most of all the Forge Father of the chapter. This used to be solitary work for the Salamanders, but in recent years, thanks to the Ultima founding, several successor chapters of the Salamanders, such as the Hammers of Nocturne and Covenant of Fire, have also joined the hunt. Drawing from the teachings of Vulkan, the Salamanders grew to be renowned as compassionate towards the average citizens of the Imperium and as defenders of the weak. Rare amongst chapters, the Salamanders, with the exception of fire drakes, live amongst the civilian population of their homeworld Nocturne and serve as guardians, exemplars, and caretakers. While some decry this as a weakness, including even formal denouncements from the High Lords of Terror in the past, the Salamanders see it as a strength and maintain enough political capital to carry on in their own ways, thanks to being a founding legion. Similarly, the Salamanders have always evinced a readiness to ally themselves with other Imperial forces, to the extent that they are often the first chapter to extend diplomatic overtures. Although the Salamanders follow the Codex Astartes, they nonetheless also follow the doctrines of their own Promethean cult. The Promethean cult places high emphasis on self-reliance, self-sacrifice, and loyalty. It also sees importance in collective decision-making and the good of the whole. To that end, the people of Nocturne, and by extension, the Salamanders, are prone to holding political councils of elders to debate and decide upon important courses of action in a way not dissimilar to the quorums of Macragge. Symbols of the Forge, such as fire and hammers, are prominent throughout Promethean iconography. As such, flamers, melter weapons, and thunder hammers are widely used throughout the chapter. As one can imagine, this preference for flamers and melters leads to a strong affinity among the Salamanders for close-range firefight when in combat, although they are just as capable at other aspects of Space Marine battle doctrine. After reuniting with their Primarch, the Legion became formally based on Vulkan's home system. New legionaries hail from the harsh and hot Nocturne and the planet's moon, Prometheus. Prometheus occupies an erratic orbit, causing great seasons of severe tectonic activity and weather disruption on Nocturne. The worst of these is known as the Time of Trial, when once every 15 Terran years, the moon passes so close that thousands of volcanoes erupt, their ash so thick it blots out the sun. With the ground gripped by constant earthquakes at the same time as this ash winter, much of Nocturne becomes effectively uninhabitable. The reward for enduring the time of trial can be great. The tectonic upheavals bring materials and ores to the surface of great value, and the aftermaths of such altered geography usually reveal new pockets of natural resources to be explored, mined, or siphoned. This translates to vast wealth by imperial standards and has created a great culture of artificiary amongst the sons of Vulkan. The Salamanders operate great forges, manufacturing equipment to an incredible standard even for Astartes, and whatever cannot be built themselves can be traded for with the Adeptus Mechanicus or other imperial corporate bodies. The Salamanders' fortress monastery is located upon the giant moon, Prometheus, acting as the orbital dock for their space vessels. While it is permanently staffed, much of the Salamanders not on deployment can be found scattered over Nocturne, acting as the elders of the settlements from which they came. The Salamanders maintain close contact with their origins and see watching over their homeworld's citizens, and by extension, all people of the Imperium, as part of their duty. Because of their early training as blacksmiths, all Salamanders are fully capable of maintaining and performing moderate repair on their weapons and armor, leaving the chapter's artificers with the free time necessary to create great works of technology and metallurgy. As a result, the Salamanders chapter has an unusually high number of master-crafted weapons, artificer armor, and even tactical dreadnought armor. The chapter also favors the use of Land Raider Redeemers. In an interesting example of juxtaposition, however, the fluctuating gravity of Nocturne makes training with certain units such as land speeders and bikes difficult. Therefore, the chapter makes little use of them in favor of Devastator squads and Terminator squads. Trained never to give up or retreat, Salamanders are capable of going on when their entire squad is dead, holding positions for months on end. This is one of the more significant effects of Promethean doctrines upon the chapter's collective psyche. Before each battle, the Salamanders get a brand mark, each by a brander priest. This symbolizes their respect for the chapter. Only veterans ever get brand marks on their faces. Though the Salamanders can fight in any theater under any conditions, they have a special proclivity towards close combat through the use of flame weapons and melter weapons. They are also fond of deploying mass heavy armor alongside fire-wielding heavy infantry, making a methodical advance that annihilates the enemy with incendiaries and heavy firepower. Their skills also have proven able to translate into being extremely effective in defense and boarding actions. In battle, the Salamanders are known to be incredibly patient and will wait until the enemy is in range of their flame weaponry before unleashing their fire. The Salamanders also maintain unusually large amounts of Terminator armor, which can only be maintained by the skill of a chapter known to be artisans. One of Vulkan's major reforms was to largely unify his scattered legion and do away with its ad hoc strategic operations. However, he sought to do so in a way that preserved, where possible, the spirit of autonomy and self-sufficiency the component units of the Salamanders had developed. For this reason, the chapter is ordered around 7 realms, each linked with one of Nocturne's 7 great city settlements. To each of these, he assigned a Lord Commander, known also as a Protector, as it is also their duty to protect their settlement in times of attack. Each Nocturnian city settlement serves as a focus of the Legion's recruitment and their governance of the planet, anchoring the legionaries to the humans for whom they fought, and each city settlement has gone on to exhibit its own unique influences on the Salamanders' traditions. Like all chapters, the rigors meted out to aspirants recruited from the population of Nocturne are harsh, and the deadly world makes for the perfect proving ground for these potential warriors. A large part of Salamander's training aims to transform the aspirant not only physically but also mentally, weeding out those who would not live up to the ideals espoused by Vulkan. Commonly, the first major challenge aspirants face is a grueling march across Nocturne's ash wastes, braving native fauna. After this, they will oversee a series of challenges based on the concepts of earth and fire. What challenges presented vary. The Salamanders are noted to stipulate a long and arduous recruitment process for initiates. They start young, at around ages 6 or 7. For these first years, the apprentice is merely that, a worker in the forge of a space marine who will watch over and judge the prospects of the initiates. After some years, the apprentices are judged by the chapter's apothecaries and chaplains in a series of examinations. Those successful will be taken for first-stage implantation. At set intervals throughout their training, the initiates must replicate feats performed by Vulkan in his youth, including those he performed in a contest with the Emperor. This will culminate in them being required to hunt and slay a salamander. This final task sees the initiate accepted as a full battle brother, and they forever will preserve and respect the drake's hide as part of their duty as a warrior. Some warriors will wear the hide upon their power armor. With the opening of the Great Rift and the return of both Guilliman and the Lion, the Salamanders eagerly hope for their own Primarch's return. Regardless of Vulkan's fate, his ideals do truly live on in his sons, and the lives of many Imperial citizens have been saved by the Salamanders' arrival and their commitment to the defense of the defenseless. Thank you for listening to this entry from the Warhammer 40,000 Lexicanum.